Cool. Hello, everybody. My name, as Dan said, is Forrest Norvell, and I work for NPM Incorporated. NPM is many things, and before I get started, how many of you have used NPM? Excellent. That's what I like to see. That's traction. So NPM is many things. First and foremost, it is a project to support the installation of packages. It is also, for about the last 9 or 10 months, a company that in fact employs me. It is a small team of people working together. I believe that as of today, there are 11 of us. It is a philosophy and an ethos. The philosophy is based around small modules and lots of a big ecosystem putting together many small pieces into larger applications. And the ethos is very simply stated as nice people matter. We want to be working on fun things together and pushing things forward together and remembering that we are all in this together. And most pertinently to this discussion, NPM is also a product family, which is to say that it is many different pieces of software. When people talk about NPM, they typically talk about it in the context of the thing you type in at your prompt when you're trying to install packages. But there is also a registry where all of the packages, well, actually many registries where all of the packages are hosted. There is a website where you can use to find out more about those packages and how they're connected to each other. And then there's the piece that I am responsible for, the command line interface. The command line interface, I should actually back up a little bit and say that each one of these separate things has its own team within NPM. So there are 11 of us. There are 3 software development teams within the organization and a CXO team. And I think that's basically it at this point. So we are all extremely busy people with a lot of work to do who are shipping a lot of stuff very quickly. It's an extremely interesting and fast-paced place to work, but it's also kind of stressful as a result. The CLI team, which is what I am on, is 3 people. There is Isaac Schluter, who was the maintainer of Node for quite a while, the developer originally of the NPM whole thing. Like all of these 3 teams are actually all taking on pieces of stuff that Isaac did all by himself for a really long time. And he is still, by a fairly long distance, the most productive developer at NPM. But he's a CEO now, so we can't let him write too much code or else things start catching on fire. There's also Rebecca Turner. She's the newest addition to the team. She works out of Massachusetts. She's working with me on extending the CLI to do new stuff. And then there's me, and I'm kind of a complicated story. So I have a background in working on kind of ridiculous problems. Would you say that's fair, Dan?
I would say that's fair.
And I was given the opportunity. Yeah, I mean, whatever. Like I have solved a couple fairly hard problems, and 9 months or so ago, Isaac and Lori came to me and they're like, would you like to work on NPM? And I was like, sure. Here are all the things that I'm really not good at because it sounds like you want me to do some of those. And they're like, no, that's fine. Just come and you're going to do all this stuff and it'll be great. We'll have fun. I'm like, sounds good to me because these are all people, the NPM team is filled with people that I've wanted to work with for a long time. We're all people who have a lot of respect for each other's intellectual abilities, and it's a very different feeling kind of company. It's not a typical kind of startup, and that was really appealing to me. I also have a lot of interests in things related to traditional software engineering, which is something that NPM had not had a lot of contact with up until that point. Things that I am very interested in include support, process, and roadmaps. And you're going to hear me spend a lot of time talking about roadmaps later on. And I kind of got in there and got in the middle of stuff. I had no idea what I was doing or where I was going with this stuff or even really what my real purpose for being there was for about, I don't know, 2 or 3 months. And then eventually I kind of got it figured out. And for my sins, I got made the team lead of the CLI team. So now I have a lot of responsibility and not very much free time. It's great. So my team's duties, I put this first. I put the idea of meeting our business objectives first because this is a really important thing to discuss when you're talking about commercial open source software development. We absolutely have to have money, and we have to have a revenue plan to make more money in the future, or else this awesome product that everybody depends upon will not be able to sustain its own development. When you are using any kind of open source product, that you have to ask yourself, where is this coming from? Like, what is going to keep this around tomorrow? Before you put your faith in it, before you put your work into it, you need to make sure that this is something that's going to still be around in a month or two. And this is something that we are all very focused on, and this is a very important part of what I do, is to make sure that all of the other stuff that we do when we're working on NPM and when people are contributing to NPM is going to serve those business goals. This is something you absolutely should be looking at when you're looking at contributing to an open source project or starting one yourself. How are you going to sustain its development long term? It doesn't have to be commercial, but there has to be some way of making sure that there's going to be resources available to work on it. Another very important thing I do is fix bugs. You know, like any sufficiently complex product, there is an infinite number of bugs in NPM, and I am constantly introducing more just to make sure that I never run out of work. A very, very important thing that I need to spend less time on than I typically do, because it is something that can absorb all of my time forever if I let it, is supporting our users. We have a sort of non-traditional support channel, as you've probably noticed if you've ever seen an error trace out of NPM. And of course, you never have, because it never has any problems. And that is, it says, you know, file this whole thing on an issue on our issue tracker. And basically, one of us will look at those issues and will help you out if nobody else in the community does. And this is something that I find incredibly rewarding, because why I am doing is what I am doing is to help all of you out. Like, that is what gets me going in the morning. But it is also extremely draining and absorbing and time-consuming work. And then this is actually probably the most important thing, but it actually occupies a relatively small piece of my time. I just got to keep the project moving forward. We have goals, we need to hit them, we need to make sure that we are doing product development to make sure that we hit those product goals. But that actually is something that where I have to do more thinking than I actually have to do coding. So my mission is to make NPM the most useful tool it can be for the most people. And I need to spend a little time talking about what useful means when we're talking about it in terms of software values. So one of my values is that pragmatism is more important than rigor or pedanticism. People don't want their tools to surprise them. And here's a really good example of a very tiny thing that Isaac added to NPM that is actually surprisingly contentious. If you type in npm isn't all, if you mistype and you don't get install the first time, it will just do it. It doesn't log a warning, this isn't even really in the documentation. It's just there. It's a little teeny thing that Isaac added because a bunch of people mistyped install. We could say, oh, you misspelled this, we're going to fix this for you this time, or we could get rid of that. There are people who file bugs all the time saying, get rid of this, this is dumb, it's I don't know why you are coddling the weak, or whatever their objections are. But like, that's not the point. The point is we want to save people time, get out of their way, and help them get things done. Like, I am so not interested in having absolute rigorous purity around all this stuff. Like, you can go use whatever language you think is overly strict if you want to do that. Like, NPM's job is to help you get stuff done, and it's to stay out of your way. Another one is I would much rather NPM have a small controlled vocabulary of things that it does really well than trying to absorb everything and be an everything tool. Like, it's really easy for package management solutions to turn into like world devourers. And like, there's several negative consequences that come from that. One is it's very difficult to completely master the tool. And another one is that you end up having to impose structure that matches your workflow because there's just too many free variables otherwise. There's too many ways things can go, and like the whole thing just kind of devolves into an amorphous, shapeless mass. So you basically, what you want is you want something like Debian's APT. Like, I take a lot of inspiration from that. The needs of a Unix distribution's package installer is very different from a programming language's package manager. Like, the use cases are very different, and the level of expertise of the users is very different. Like, a system administrator is very different from a front-end developer, for instance. But the underlying idea that you have a fixed vocabulary of very powerful commands that you can master and know and like expect them to behave in a certain way on every single environment that you're running this in, I think that is a very positive value. And the idea is here to make sure that NPM does the things it does very well, and we provide room in the community to fill in the cracks around the things that we don't do very well. Another thing, and this one's like as close as I get to like playing devil's advocate or doing a counterfactual in this presentation. Something I have learned about developers is they love to skip straight to the solution. They're like, okay, I have a problem and I know exactly what you need to do and I know exactly what line, and here's like a pull request that changes 3 characters, and like here's no tests to go with it, and if I had tried to run the test, I'd see that I just broke like 80 things. Like when you go straight to the solutions like that, what you are doing is you are short-circuiting the process where you talk about your assumptions. Assumptions are very important. You need to have a shared consensus about worldviews before you can figure out exactly what it is you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it. I used to work at New Relic, which has probably one of the best product managers I have ever encountered in my life. And basically all Jim does all day is like, wait, no, stop talking. Just tell me in very simple words, what's the problem you're trying to solve? That is the important thing to know. If you can ask 5 different people to say in very simple, concrete terms what problem it is you're trying to solve, then you can learn so much about the larger problems that people want to solve with your tool, and then start to work towards creating a common understanding of those problems and come up with one solution that will solve all 5 problems instead of 5 little teeny solutions that solve 5 different problems and probably create a bunch more because you're decreasing the coherence of the philosophy of the product. And also, what's familiar to you and your assumptions are quite frequently incorrect. And so you need to make sure that you are walking through that whole process so that you get there and you're like, because this happens a lot on the NPM issue tracker. Somebody will say like, I need this to do this, and the fact that it doesn't do this is totally stupid and your product is busted and I'm gonna go use Bower. And I'm just like, okay, so let's talk about this a little bit and let's kind of like, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Like I have basically a canned script that I go through this, and it's amazing, like just walking through this process, like more often than not, what will end up happening is that people will get to the end, they're like, oh, I don't really need this at all. I can do this other thing. And I'm like, excellent. Less work for everybody, and you have a better understanding of the tool. That's brilliant. And to kind of harp on my earlier point a little bit earlier, something that makes you money is better than something that doesn't make you money. And like always be thinking about the solutions in terms of things that get you closer to your business objectives. Like this is something that is very important for open source software. Open source software is something that it's very easy for big companies, all the users of the software, to just sort of parasitically take advantage of it, and you have to proactively work to make sure you're doing things that are going to bring in revenue. And you also have to serve NPM has crazy traction. Like we're doing something like 26 million package downloads a day. We just crossed the 600 million package downloads over the last 30 days line this week. Like these are funny numbers, right? Like there's 100,000 packages in NPM. Like I could come up with these kinds of like arbitrary, ultimately pretty meaningless metrics that sound really impressive all day long. The only reason we have gotten to that point is that we have a product that people love, and the only reason that people love our product is that it mostly stays out of their way and does mostly what they expect most of the time. And so we have to keep doing that. We have to keep serving the needs of a lot of people, which probably includes most of the people in this room, who are never going to give NPM Incorporated a single dollar, right? So in order to do that, we have to keep working towards these larger business goals. This is something that I'm probably going to keep harping on through this whole talk, but it's a really important thing to keep in mind because it affects how you as an individual user or contributor to the project can contribute most to it yourself. There's a lot of stuff left on the table for people who aren't at NPM Incorporated to do. So there's a problem that NPM has that is actually a consequence of its success. And I have helpfully highlighted that problem on this slide. there are a lot of open issues on NPM, and there's a very small number of people who are actively working to triage and close those issues. So I did a little number crunching. Rebecca and I have spent the last month and a half triaging through all those issues and making sure they're all at the very least categorized. And so we've broken it down. There's about 356 support tickets. Those support tickets can take us anywhere from 5 minutes to several days to work through, because people who are new are very good at finding weird edge cases. Like, new users have Murphy fields, right? Like, they just cause stuff to break all around them. That makes them super valuable, but they're also not in a very good position to tell you what's going on. Like, especially people who are, more in corporate IT or working with Windows, where they are not accustomed to really digging into their environment, or they may just be brand new to this stuff in general. Like, it's very difficult to get information. It's very absorbing. So, like, this is one of the, like I said, one of the things that I have to be very careful about not allowing to monopolize my time. There are 222 bugs. A lot of those bugs are probably duplicates. A lot of those bugs are probably not actually bugs. But until we actually confirm that they're closed, we have to leave them alone. And most interestingly, there are 236 great ideas that you guys have come up with that we may or may not ever do anything with. So let's talk a little bit about product management in the abstract. A product manager owns the roadmap, which means that they have to talk to all of the stakeholders within the organization, including the people who are responsible for driving forward revenue, which means it can be marketing, it can be sales, it can be the board, it can be the investors. They have to take that and turn that into a set of benchmarks that the products have to hit, which then gets turned into engineering plans and then gets put out there. And I actually kind of skipped a step earlier when I was talking about what I do all day. I kind of forgot to mention the part that I have several hats I wear. I mean, I still write software, and I have to write software very quickly because it actually accounts for a relatively small piece of the amount of time I have. I do quite a bit of frontline support myself. I work on this roadmap. I write blog posts, which are part of my mission communicating all of this stuff back out to the world at large, because it's very important that the community understand where we're going with this stuff. I highly recommend that everybody take a look at the NPM blog. I mean, I know company blogs are pretty fluffy a lot of the time, but we actually put good stuff on ours. And I work really hard on the blog posts I write, and I'm always amazed that they let me get away with putting so many words on there. So you should check it out. But that's the thing. The product management is actually the thing that's the most important thing that I do, I think, and that is figuring out what all this stuff works. But it's a little different in that in traditional product management, you have to say no a lot. You have to say, we can't do that this quarter, or I know that we've incurred a lot of technical debt, but we can't afford to clean that up right now because we have to hit these targets to meet these sales goals. And you have to be very dogmatic about what you say yes to and making sure that those things actually get hit. Open source product management is a little different, because any power I have as a member of the NPM community and as an NPM CLI maintainer derives exclusively from the trust that is put in me by my stakeholders, which is to say my users, which is to say all of you. And at the same time, NPM can't be all things to all people. So it is not my job to say no when somebody has an idea. It is my job to say, what is this thing that you need to have happen to be able to do your job? And is there a way that you can already do that with the product that you have? And if not, is there any way that you can work with me to actually add this functionality yourself? Because that is not something that sits right on our roadmap right now. But if you send me a pull request, I'll be happy to see that it gets merged in. So really, the power I have goes away if I abuse it. If I just you see this happen all the time with open source projects. And this is kind of a lot of the noise that surrounds, in particular, like the Linux kernel. Like, if I just come out and I'm an asshole to people and I'm like, no, we're not going to do that and you're stupid for suggesting it, people aren't going to listen for very long. And like the thing about open source is they can just fork it, right? Like there are about 5 or 6 forks of NPM right now. And there are people working on very different ways of doing things because they just think that we have our heads up our asses. And that's the thing about open source. They are entirely entitled to do that. And as much as it is not incredibly inconvenient to me, I will try to make sure that I am not doing anything that breaks their world too much. But I want to keep everybody on the main NPM CLI. I want to keep everybody using the NPM registry. I want to keep this whole ecosystem kind of pointed in the same direction. I ultimately joined NPM because I thought it was my best opportunity to support the Node community. And to do that, I have to make sure that we're all kind of facing the same direction. So I have to be consensus seeking. And I do sometimes have to say no, but I have to be nice about it. There's no value to us as a community in fracturing that community by being overly divisive and being overly contentious. We don't have enough momentum and enough people involved to engage in a lot of the power games that something like Linux does. There is money in the Node world. Several of us here are working for companies that are trying to build their entire revenue base exclusively on top of Node. But there isn't the same latitude. We don't have IBM bankrolling us for billions of dollars like Linux did in the late 90s. And also, we're just generally not the kind of people who enjoy being, mean to people for no reason. So, it's the hardest part of my job is when I have to find out some way to say, I know you really care about this a lot. I know this is something you really want to see land, but it just doesn't make sense for the NPM community as a whole. The ecosystem cannot deal with this. It's going to fragment things too much. It's going to be too hard for people to use and to understand. It's going to be a repeat of adding the caret operator all over again, which is a joke that two of you will get. So let's talk about a concrete example of this. People want NPM to be more extensible because they do want it to do everything. I mean, it's just a natural thing. Everybody they want it to turn into the Emacs of package managers. That's just kind of how these things go. So we have this life cycle, right? There's pre-install, pre-publish. There are these hooks that you can attach scripts to that will run when you install your package. And that's not fine-grained enough to people. So they come to us and they're like, oh God, add more hooks. We need to have more fine-grained events to figure out when we're going to compile our TypeScript or whatever. And that will somehow fix all of their problems forever. No. Workflows tend to be particular to individual teams, and it's counterproductive to presuppose that you know what workflow is going to work for every team. And adding an infinite number of potential hooks isn't going to be flexible enough. You can keep doing this until you've got this abstract workflow engine, and then you've recreated a lot of the excesses of J2EE, which I don't know if anybody here has spent much time in the J2EE or ASP.NET trenches, but it's there's just too much abstraction and too little of it actually allows you to do the kinds of things that Edmund was talking about, where you can spend 20 minutes and have a working chat server, right? You need to make sure that you are, and at the same time, you don't want to be I'm kind of lost patience with David Hannemeyer Hansen, right? This notion of omakase was a really powerful simplifying factor in the early days of Rails, but for instance, I think that the way that Rails deals with databases is bullshit, and I would want to have there actually be some real relational code in there, but I can't really do that without cutting strongly against the grain of the project. Node is really, its power, and modern JavaScript's power is in its composability. Components were thought to be this phantom that you were never going to get. There's whole books about how component-oriented programming is a crock. But we've actually kind of done it now for some definition of done it. We've figured out a pragmatic way to make this stuff work, and it's basically done by following some fairly simple basic software engineering principles of high cohesion, low coupling, and lots of small pieces that are simple enough for you to hold in your head all at one time. So when you're looking at this package tool, we don't want to start making this thing all monolithic and everybody has to do things the same way. I really don't like Maven. I thought it was awesome when I started using it. I thought it was such a huge improvement over Ant, because it was a huge improvement over Ant, and it was a huge improvement over Make. But then I had to start doing things differently. I needed to integrate it with my continuous integration server, and I needed to build out some web stuff. And all of a sudden, it's oh God, this life cycle is completely inflexible, and it totally doesn't match my needs. And I really don't want people to be saying that sort of thing about NPM. So how do I do that? By not having it do that stuff in the first place. And like we could go back and like there's another way. Like a bunch of people, Max Ogden has asked me to like make NPM like allow me to just plug commands in. But like again, going back to what I was saying before, like it gets harder to hold the surface of the whole API of NPM in your head. And I want people to have like a really simple like I want people to understand what their tools are doing for them. Like I want NPM to do way less than it does right now over time. Like there's a lot to keep in mind. Like just understanding all the crap you can do with Semver is like a few weeks worth of effort. And like I'm still running across stuff in NPM like, oh wow, that's cool. I had no idea it did that. And I've been working with this thing day in, day out relentlessly for about 7 months now. So the thing to take away from this is that NPM is just, it can't be everything for everybody. If you keep focusing exclusively on immediate solutions, you'll end up with something that won't work or will be completely unusable. I mean, you'll just be like, you'll get analysis paralysis trying to use the command line. By the way, I'm going way over time, and if you need me to shut up at some point, just tell me.
I haven't had the opportunity to listen to you talk in several months.
Okay.
Are we going to get kicked out at 8:30 on the next?
No. It's 8 o'clock. We're good.
All right, cool. Well, I'm going to keep talking forever then. So let's turn this problem inside out. This is, everything I say from this point is like something that I have decided to do that may turn out to be like an incredibly bad idea, but it's what I'm trying, and like the willingness to try this, I think, is actually something that's super important if you're trying to really move things forward with a project. So what I want to do with NPM is I want to turn it into a set of APIs that are plugged into a simple CLI kind of like infrastructure. And those APIs can be pulled out and consumed independently. So if you wanted to come up with something that was like NPM but installed just somewhere other than Node modules, or you wanted to integrate Browserify directly in there, or you basically wanted to turn NPM into Bower or Yeoman directly, you just go ahead and write your own package manager. You can use whatever pieces of the NPM infrastructure you want and just consume them as APIs. So right now, I'm working on a rewrite of the cache, and the cache is actually a huge piece of what NPM does, because it's like how it figures out where to go, like to the registry, or to a local tarball, or to GitHub, or whatever, to pull all that stuff down and put it in a form that it can actually be installed. So if you have a caching module where you give it a description of a package, which is just a string, it'll go and figure out how to get all that stuff on your local disk in a form that you can then go ahead and install. So that's one piece. There's another piece that's the piece that actually talks to the registry and pulls that stuff down. Like the cache doesn't know that the cache model doesn't know the network exists. The registry model doesn't know that the disk exists. And then the CLI starts integrating all this stuff together. And eventually you end up with a set of loosely coupled components that are fairly sophisticated and powerful on their own, but are basically black boxes where all you have to do are the API calls that you're going to use, and you can build it. That's the theory. That's what we're working to. It's very time-consuming work because I don't ever want to be re-implementing this stuff from scratch because I'm really paranoid about second system effect. And anybody who's been a software engineer for a while should totally also be very paranoid about that. So I have no idea if this is going to work. Like it's a slow-moving project. It gets interrupted a lot by a lot of the more immediate things that I have to take care of because, again, I have to make sure that I'm doing the things that are going to support our revenue plans. By the way, if you need a private registry for your large, wealthy Node-using company, we have a product called NPM Enterprise that is available today. It's pretty awesome. If you need help getting it customized for your environment, there is a company called NodeSource. You may know some people who work there who can help customize that for your environment. And you should talk to us if that's something that you think your company needs. But I do have to take some chances. I have to do some experimentation. I have to make some big moves to see if we can actually solve a lot of these bigger problems all at once. Like if you're just doing things incrementally forever, sometimes you do have to do some fairly disruptive things to actually make a substantial advance forward. So what this is an example of is I took a look at a lot of different requests. People wanted more lifecycle events. People wanted more extensibility. And what I try to do is synthesize that into a few global solutions for all these little localized problems. And I tried to make sure that each goal was supporting all the others so that I can actually say, okay, so we can finish this project that will support this other project over here. I do the cache rewrite that can help me improve NPM shrink wrap because now we can use SHA-SUMs in our shrink wrap files and we don't have to always hit disk to pull down the tarballs to get the same bits on disk. If that doesn't make a lot of sense to you, that's okay. But what I'm getting at is like we have these different ways of tying all these different pieces together, and that's a really powerful thing in terms of maximizing the value of the contributions that we make to the code base. That's the important piece there. You want to make sure that you are always getting the most bang for your buck as somebody working on a project. And more open source projects can stand to do this. Like you need to take a step back periodically and be like, okay, what are the big things that I need to do for my project? And your project doesn't have to be that big before there are things that would really make a difference in terms of its usability or its applicability and the amount of traction that people are likely to get for it. So I've kind of talked about how we build this stuff. Let's talk concretely about NPM's actual roadmap. There's a blog post I put up about, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago that describes a lot of this stuff. And you know, the thing I wrote 2 or 3 months ago, yeah, I finished one item on that list so far. I feel pretty good about that. And that's scope packages. Scope packages are important because they are actually what is going to support both NPM Enterprise and our effort to allow you to have GitHub-style private packages on the global NPM registry. So that is a feature that is coming probably within the next quarter. And what that will mean is that you can then actually have packages that you use within your own company and that other people can see, but that aren't globally usable for everybody. So we had to build that out for that. I've talked a little bit about my colleague Rebecca. She's working on this project. This is mostly a technical debt project, multi-stage install, but it will have the nice benefit of making it a hell of a lot easier to understand what the NPM installer is doing when it's running. Because right now it's got this kind of stream-oriented pull thing where it's like, okay, so I'm going to read this package JSON file here, and it's going to tell me I need to install this stuff. And then I'm going to read that, like each one of those things, package.json files, and it like figures out what it's doing as it's going along. And what this project does is like, okay, here's what we got on disk, here's what we need to add, here's the list of changes that need to be made, and like all this stuff can be like portrayed to people. The real benefit of this is that we can have progress bars in the NPM installer. And we can get rid of the spinner, and everybody hates the spinner. So that'll be great. And then I've talked about this. I periodically get people who are just like frustrated beyond all measure and are convinced that we absolutely hate Windows users. And that's not just true of NPM, that's true of Node in general. We don't. It just turns out that building one platform that will support multiple operating systems when they're as different as Unix-like operating systems and Windows is incredibly hard. And it's also made harder by the fact that, to be perfectly blunt, most of the people close to Node Core don't have a lot of time or patience for Windows. I mean, I have a VM that has Windows 8.1 in it, and I will run that periodically, but I'm not full-time dogfooding it. I know I should be, but that's hard, right? And so, but the thing is, a lot of the people who are who stand to benefit the most from NPM, which is to say front-end developers working for large shops, like people doing Ember and Angular apps at big companies where they're issued computers by the company, are on Windows. And they're also people who tend to be the most, I guess, vulnerable users in that they are not necessarily like turbo nerds, right? Like they have problems they need to solve, and all they know is that they open up a command window and they type something and it doesn't work, or they go and they try to look at the contents of their project in Windows Explorer and everything explodes forever because the paths are too long, right? Like these are hard, real usability problems, and they are not amenable to easy solution. And that is something that I intend, well, all of us at NPM want to see addressed better. And this is something that, as a community, Node has to get better about. And that's just me banging my drum a little bit. And like I said, client-side development support, super important. Lori, my CTO, Lori is a dude, I should point out. Like, he gets testy when people call him a woman on Twitter. That's really more an issue between him and his parents than anything else, but we don't really need to get into that right now. Wrote a long post about kind of the cow paths that we're trying to pave. Right now, client-side development or browser development is Still a little more greenfield than you would expect, given that JavaScript was originally developed for the browser and has now been around for like, I don't know, 18 years or so. There's a lot of tooling in that space. Some of it probably is redundant. So we want to improve NPM to the point where you can have an entire workflow that's just NPM for all of your stuff. That's why it's not called the Node Package Manager anymore. By the way, that is not what the acronym actually doesn't stand for anything at this point, but if you press us, we'll say that it stands for no problem, meatbag. We are a JavaScript package manager, and we intend to commit to that more going forward. We do not see ourselves as exclusively or even primarily a Node tool anymore. And that is a scary commitment for us to make, because there are a lot of different use cases for front-end development. There's a far bigger API surface for the front end than there is for the server side. And there are a lot of big heavyweight players who've been thinking really hard about this problem for a long time. The good news is that we've gotten at least verbal commitments from most of the big front-end frameworks to work with us to figure this out. We're spending a bunch of time talking to people at Google. We spend a bunch of time talking to, if that's the way to describe it, the various members of the Ember team about what they need. We are on fairly good terms with the people who develop the Browserify, and that they come and work out of our offices a lot of the time. We want to make sure that we are at the very least not getting in the way of people, but if we can figure out a way to solve this problem, we would very much like to. And it's not really about empire building. It's very easy to think about this in terms of like NPM will control everything, and we'll get total open source domination of JavaScript and then make you all work in our sugar mines or something. I don't know exactly what the end state is there, but like that's not what it's about. The real story here is coming up with convergence, making sure that the NPM registry is something that can support all these different use cases, make sure that we've got the tooling necessary to save you all time, because ultimately that's what we want to do. We want to make web development easier. I mean, if there is a religion that NPM as a company adheres to, it is the religion of web development. And making that as painless and as straightforward as possible is something that we really want to do. So that's kind of this. So this is all what we're doing. What about you guys? We're really busy. And we would be completely boned without the help of our users. Like even just filing issues is a hugely valuable thing for people to do, because there's just way too many use cases and edge cases, and our test coverage kind of sucks, for us to be able to like really identify all these things ahead of time. So we've actually, over the last few months, evolved the release process. And this release process is pretty easy to state. We drop a new release every Thursday. Whatever is ready on that Thursday, and this just happened to me today, I really wanted to get a couple things in there. I'm like, I gotta put my slides together, and I'm just not gonna be able to figure this out. But whatever, I cut a release and put it out. We use the dist tags feature of NPM, which very few people seem to know about, to publish that new release to NPM Next, so that people who, like a very simple thing you guys can do to help us out is to just install NPM at Next and file issues if things break. The whole point of doing that is let it burn in for a week, let us see if there's anything that's totally messed up, and if so, we can avoid what we used to do, which is we'd like the Node core team would be like, okay guys, what version of NPM should we include for the new release? And be like, oh, okay, let's cut a new release real quick. And we put it in there, and oh my god, we totally broke everything, and so now they have to put out a new version of NPM and a new version of Node, and it's awesome, because the release process for Node is really simple, because they have like only like 6 or 7 operating systems they need to support. So we wanted to avoid that. We wanted more consistency and repeatability. And the idea is that whatever is on latest, so if you just do npm-g install npm, you should get the latest, safest version of NPM. And I encourage everybody to do that, although it's sort of a pain in the ass on Windows, and you have to go to the troubleshooting guide to really figure out how to upgrade NPM on Windows right now. We're working on that. That's part of what I was talking about before. Supporting NPM. Like I said, this is an attractive nuisance for me. I love connecting directly with people. I love doing this stuff. I don't have time to spend as much as I do on it. So we are going to add a command that will make it much easier for you. It's kind of like, I can't remember what Ubuntu calls it, but in Debian it's report bug, where like something bad happens and you type a command and it automatically creates a pre-populated issue report for us with all the relevant details on it. That's a ways out. I think I need to elevate that in popularity, in importance, because that would be a huge supportability win for us. But there are several people who I've never met, nobody at NPM has ever met that spends substantial chunks of their time answering questions with the support label on them. And that is awesome. I love that. The only caveat I have is just if you don't know something, don't answer just to try to be helpful. Like, that's actually bad. Like, make sure that you're only answering stuff that you know about, but like, if you do see something like, oh, that's really easy, you just need to do blah, 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 totally chime in, and that means I can just go, resolve is closed. Yay, thank you very much. And then here's a tweet I put out about a month ago, 2 months ago, I guess. These are the things, this is kind of like a rank list of what's most useful to me. I love getting failing tests. Like, I still know the NPM source code. Like, Isaac and I and Rebecca know the NPM source code way better than anybody else. It's kind of a scary code base. If you've ever looked inside it, it's weird because Isaac is really smart and really fast. And one of our goals is to make it so that it looks less like the kind of code that was written by somebody who's really smart and really fast and is a rogue cop who plays by his own rules. Second thing, patches with tests. God, I love it when I get a pull request with tests. Sometimes the tests are way more valuable than the patch. That is, I know it's a huge pain in the butt, especially because we have this like weird test structure, but like it's incredibly valuable. Bare patches, I still like those. A good bug report is incredibly valuable to me. Like if you just straight up say, like if you can give me a gist that has a complete NPM debug log in it and a terse description of what happened and what you expected to happen, that's awesome. Problem statements, like I need to do X and I can't do that right now. That is really valuable. And then down, like way down at the bottom is feature requests and ideas. We have more feature requests and ideas than we know what to do with. Like having some way to actually turn those into actual working features is far more valuable. So we're getting close to the end here, just to let everybody know. This is helpful to navigate our issue tracker because it's incredibly daunting. Because like I said, we've got close to 900 issues open. These are all different labels. So these are the top level buckets that I try to put everything in. Something is either a bug, a support request, or a feature request. They can be both a bug and a support request. Support basically is a reminder to myself, don't spend more than 30 seconds on this unless it's Monday or Friday, which are the days I have allocated for support. I have to be really rigorous about my time management or shit just does not get done. And this is the thing where I could use the most help from the community. Like helping everybody else get stuff moving forward is a really useful thing. This is project management. Like these are all things that we know wants to land along with some rough scoping. So next patch is going to be in the next week's release if I can get it in there in time. Next minor will be the next thing where we add features, and next major means it is probably going to be breaking in some way, so we want to push it along for the ride with another breaking feature. We kind of like, this is like, I could give a whole talk on Semver, but we're kind of like trying to figure out what Semver really means. Like, it seems to me like ideally a major version bunch should only have one breaking change in it, but sometimes we're like, no way, we're just going to cram all this crap in there because otherwise you're on like version 90 within 3 months. And that's not a problem. You're not going to run out of integers, but people think it's weird. And then these are what we're moving towards to make it easier for people to get started with contribution. Documentation patches are a great way for people to get involved because the documents, do you guys know about the phenomenon of expert blindness? Like after you've been working on something for a while, you no longer know what's easy and what's hard anymore. And like that's really true of anybody that's been working on NPM for a while. Like I was way better at being able to figure out the holes in the documentation before I spent all my time working with it. I'm like, oh, well, that's totally obvious. It's in this, it's like taped to the bottom of a drawer in this filing cabinet in Ulaanbaatar. Like, why didn't you know about that? So like having people contribute changes to this stuff is really useful. Patch welcome is stuff where we're like, yes, that's totally awesome. We'd love to see that. We have no time to do it ourselves. So if you want to see it happen, make it happen. And we're increasingly moving towards this idea of actually explicitly tagging issues as novice issues, which are the ones that we have curated to be ones for people who want to get started in contributing to work on, because they're fairly tightly scoped, they're fairly small. It's easy for us to help you figure out what you need to do. So look for those, and if you see issues that you think should be novice, actually it's totally okay to say, hey, isn't this a novice issue? Should this be classified as such? Like, don't be afraid to yell at us on the issue tracker. Speaking of which, best practices. I hate this. Don't ever do this. Please, for the love of God. Like, I'm actually in the process of going through and locking all of the issues that haven't been touched for 3 months exclusively to keep people from doing this. There's 2 really good reasons why not to do this. One is I'm not going to reopen an issue because you are seeing a new version of the same thing that was there. Actually, 3 things. The second is people with bugs are very poor at evaluating whether their bug is the same as another bug. And so they end up putting these 2 totally unrelated things in there. So the whole thing is really confusing for people to read. And 3, every time you do that, you're spamming every single person who ever contributed to that issue. And with some of these more contentious and long-running issues, like you're spamming like a couple hundred people, and that sucks. Don't do that. If you come across a closed issue and you're like, hey, I'm on Windows 8.1 and I needed to do these 3 special things to my environment variables, and all of a sudden things start working, that's totally awesome. The other 100 people on the issue probably want to know that at some point in the future, so totally do that. There's no such thing as too much information, and there's no such thing as too little interpretation of that information. Give us the raw details, give us the logs, put them in gists so that I can actually clone them and look at your like 20 megabyte gist file rather than trying to scan through it on a GitHub page. I love use cases. I love saying, like, if somebody comes with something, this would be very useful to me because it would allow me to do blah, blah, blah. That's awesome. A +1 gets deleted with no remorse. I am done letting people clutter my issue tracker with bullshit. Patches welcome. Yes. If you come up with a nice, like even close to being landable patch, I will work to land it as quickly as I can. I will actually finish your tests if there's something, or if they're in a format that I don't like, or if you've included semicolons in your file, because that will, bring down the wrath of the Isaacs almost immediately. Like, I will just go ahead and clean that stuff up for you. If it's remotely close to landable, I will get it in there. And like I say here, no patch is too small. It can be like a typo fix. Unlike certain other projects in the Node ecosystem that are, the Node core project, I have no problem with people contributing tiny little patches. And if you are going to do something that's going to fundamentally change NPM's behavior, you should probably open an issue and we can talk about it first. Because nothing makes me sadder than seeing somebody do a whole bunch of work or completely rewriting a bunch of tests to meet some imagined code standard or whatever and have to tell them, we're not going to accept this. Like, I really don't like rejecting people's work. So, and that's true of all of us, right? Like, I'm talking about me, but I think this is true of the entire company, really. So if you're going to do something and it's something that you really care about and it's something that's going to require a fair amount of work and it's going to change a fair amount of code, talk to us about it first. Some brass taxi stuff. Use NPM tests that will run the top test suite. There are 2 test suites within NPM because it's a really old project, and like Isaac wrote tap after he started working on NPM, and so there's this custom test framework there that you can run with npm run test all. You should do that before submitting a pull request because it has a bunch of extra tests that you don't need most of the time, but when you do need them, they can save us from a whole bunch of nasty regressions. If you make a change to behavior, be sure and update the docs. And if you add tests, again, I love tests. Oh, they're so great. Our coverage is so terrible. We need so much help there. And the tests are kind of slow. I'm sorry about that. We're going to actually break the tests up into unit tests and integration tests soon so that it's faster to do that. But we have to actually write some unit tests first. Isaac doesn't really believe in those. Like, Isaac is kind of like my dad now, right? Like, he is kind of the boss of me, and I kind of have to be like aware and respectful of his whims and particular forms of psychosis. So that's sort of how I think of them in my head now. And that's it. Thanks, everybody. Sweet, only 28 minutes over. Yeah!
So we have negative 20 minutes for questions. Does anyone have any questions for Forrest? I'm sure he'll be succinct.
Yeah, I'll try.
And succinct question too. Client-side development. Bower will just do it for you now.
That's no. I mean, like there are a lot of things happening at the same time. We're all working towards the same goal. So the idea is that if you have a solution in mind for improving the solution for, the situation for front-end packaging today, go for it. Don't wait for anything. like we're in the Precambrian phase for all this stuff right now, right? Like really rapid evolution, lots of different ideas getting tried. Bower and Yeoman and Ember CLI, and like there's all these different tools out there, and NPM is one of them. Like we're not really, we're kind of competing, we're kind of not. Like we'd like to all figure out how to just see the problem get solved, right? And there's this other curveball in that ES6 is, coming along. And then then we're going to have ES6 modules that will change a lot of this stuff. Ember's already started sort of moving that direction. So it's confusing for users, and like by which I mean like average web developers, but I would not hold off. That is what that is the most important messaging. Like try stuff. Like I intend to try and do some of the stuff that Bower does as something that just runs as a layer on top of your package.json file. So you still use Node NPM for most things, but then there's another thing that just uses run scripts to go and do a lot of the like. And I encourage everybody to experiment. Like one of the things I didn't really get to in this is like one of the patterns I really like is people adding new features to NPM outside of NPM. And like just creating the cow paths, and then we can be like, okay, we're just going to yank that functionality directly into NPM. That's what I would like to see happen. Like I'd love to see people like pioneering new features outside the product and making it work exactly the way they want it to, because the more like detailed and concrete and specific their solution is, the more likely it is I'll be able to like respond to that, or the team will be able to respond to that and say, okay, so we're going to change this a little bit, but the basic core feature is a really good one. Well, the trick to this is like we break this up into the APIs, but the functionality is largely standard except for the things you need specific, right? So like we're all interacting with a registry in the same way, or we're all using the same cache for all this stuff with the same general approach towards metadata. And it's just the specific things that you need solved. Like the idea is to make it possible for people to get the extensible functionality they need without actually having this like hugely fractionated landscape. Fractionated? Fractured, whatever. Mm-hmm. Yes?
You said that you don't have much coverage on tests. Are you using any tool like Extensibility or something?
So that's an interesting question. Most of our tests right now are integration tests. So
Classic sign that you didn't have any unit tests.
yes. Well, or a classic sign that the person who is writing those tests thinks that unit tests are bogus. So basically, we're firing off child processes all the time. So I have to go back and look at the coverage tool landscape again to come up with something that allows me to I know that Istanbul does this now, but like basically do a pass of instrumenting all the code, run the test suite, and then collect and coalesce all the coverage information after you've run all these different tap processes that do all these different things. Like I can't just use arg, which is a tool that allows you to run a bunch of tap tests in there, because it's all being done, all the work's actually being done by child processes. It makes it, and also the thing about integration tests is it makes it hard for you to get coverage numbers that you can trust, right? Because you're hitting all the same code paths over and over and over again, and you may be incidentally hitting things, but getting good coverage numbers is hard. Any other questions?
What's the strangest feature you found in NPM as you've sort of been working through it?
That's a really hard question to answer. It's not like there's nothing big. It's just like things that you wouldn't expect to work actually do things. Like like npm repo dot works. Like it'll read the package.json file and open up the GitHub page for the thing that you're currently in. And like I only know about that because I had to make that work again when I rewrote registry client. There's a ton of little teeny affordances built into NPM. The level of thoughtfulness that Isaac put into this in the first place, and that Dominic DeNicola and Tim Oxley and all the other people have contributed to NPM over the years is sort of astonishing. Like NPM is really dangerously close to being a do what I mean tool a lot of the time, right? Like it's suspiciously intelligent. There's a lot of emergent behavior, and that's tricky because a lot of that emergent behavior is undocumented. So you may be breaking somebody's use case without even knowing about it. Which is why running all the tests is important. Run all the tests. Install Couch, too, so you can run all the tests. What do you want, phone? Oh, pager duty.
All
No.
right, well, we better let Forrest go and save NPM. I want to thank everybody for coming out.